Hey guys, today I'm going to show you 5 tips to casting a bait caster like a pro. So tip 1 is to know your bait caster. So a bait caster has 3 main components: the tension knob, which is right here, the button that you use to cast, and the magnetic brakes right here on the side. So for a beginner, you're going to start by turning your magnetic brakes, turning them all the way to the max. That's going to help prevent backlash in the beginning. Then you're going to want to turn your tension knob all the way up so that when you press the button, your lure doesn't fall at all. But let's talk lure. So for my lure, what I like to use is I like to use a little swim jig with a cross type style on the trailer. And so again, you want to always pre-set up your lure. So right now, it doesn't fall. Now I want to slowly loosen my tension knob to where it slowly falls at a faster speed, like that. Now look. And if you're a beginner, you want to have it fall a little bit slower, but because you won't be able to cast as far though, but it's easier. For me though, I'm not a beginner, so I'm gonna loosen mine up a little bit more, like that, even more honestly, like that. Next is your magnetic brakes. So again, this is what will slow your lure down and stop backlash. As a beginner, you're going to have your magnetic brakes up, but the only problem with that is you won't be able to cast as far. So because I'm not a beginner, I personally, with this lure, like to have my magnetic brakes to about right there. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you guys see that? Yeah, you can. To about right there. Okay, that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, what I'm going to give you next is how you cast. When you cast, you don't want to have your elbows out and go like that. That's not how you want to cast. What you want to do is you want to have a little flick of your wrist like that. It's in your wrists, not your arms. So, you should be able to hold something in your elbow when you cast, and you should still be able to cast. So that's what I have for tip number 2, is just know how to cast a bait caster, Tip number 3 is just practice. You just gotta practice casting. Like what I like to do is I like to have some 3 cones set up, just like I have now. And I'll just practice casting. I'll just go cone 1, and then I'll go cone 2, and then I'll go cone 3. All right, tip number 4. Tip number 4 is about your spool. Now, your line typically doesn't matter. Braided line, again, is lighter, and you'll be able to cast a little bit farther with braided line, but it really, in the long run, doesn't matter. What really matters is how much line you have in your spool. So right now for me, I have my spool almost all the way full. As a beginner, you're going to want to leave a little bit of room. You don't want your thing all the way full, but you can always have your spool full as you get more used to it, to get that extra casting distance. So yeah, make sure you have a decent amount of spool in your line. I used to have braided line on my bait caster, but I didn't have much of it on because I ran out, and I could only cast to right there. And so I switched to my normal line, and yeah, I can cast a lot further. again, tip number 5. My final tip for you guys is, again, with the spool and line stuff, is I have found it a lot easier to cast further, is pay attention to your pole and what it says for like line poundage and stuff. Like my pole, it says medium line, which is 8 to 12 pounds. So like, if you say your rod says 8 to 12 pound line, don't put 30-pound line on, because that is just not, your rod isn't made for that, and that's also going to slow down and make your casting not as far. I originally did have 30-pound line on mine, that's why I'm doing this example, and I could not cast far at all. And let's be honest, if you're fishing freshwater with a bait caster, when are you going to go for a 30-pound fish, especially if you're bass fishing? So that's my final tip for you guys. And just, keep practicing, work on your casting, and pretty soon you'll be casting your bait caster like a pro. That's all for today's video. Make sure you like and subscribe.